Alright, so I did mess up in this video. Not the build. The build turned out awesome, and we'll get to that in a minute. Shout out to Bloodline Fiber and Pronghorn bowstrings. These things settled faster than any strings I've ever used in the past, and damn it, Ellie. Apparently this is how this video is going to go. Really stealing the show here. You done? My camera's in a vulnerable position anyway. But yeah, so where I messed up when I was recording this video, the jack for my microphone actually wasn't plugged into my camera all the way. So apologies, the first half of the build, the audio is going to be a little echoey. Shout out to Red Forest Outdoors. I posted a photo on my Instagram story on Knights of the Apex on Instagram, and he caught that actually my shutter speed was off too. You guys won't notice it in the video, but thank you, dude. I appreciate you. Good dude. If you're not following him on Instagram, definitely check him out. Just solid dude. And he's got a discount code on Killcliff. It's bow build time. So I have my 2021 PSE Xpedite NXT here in the press. I'm going to do a rebuild video of it today, walk you through my process. I've done 2 previous videos on the Xpedite, my initial impressions video when I first shot the bow, and then a review video after I first received the bow and I had a couple of days of shooting it up. Since those videos dropped, I've had this bow for a couple of months now. I hunted with it in November, took a buck and a doe with it. Love this bow. I have 0 complaints. Honestly, not a whole lot has changed from my initial first impressions video. This is still, even though this is advertised as a speed bow, it doesn't really feel like a speed bow. I haven't noticed any detriments to having a shorter, the 5.5-inch brace height on here. I was very comfortable to shoot. When I took my buck, I was actually bent out around the tree that I was that my stand was in, and I was able to come to full draw, peep out, and launch it and put it right in the pump house at, it was only 20 yards, but it was still at a pretty awkward angle bending around that tree. Now, I've said this before in other videos, this is my grail bow. I loved the NXT series last year. This feels like that same bow plus 30 feet per second, which is tremendous. So I have no complaints with this bow. Now, I call this my grail bow, but the day that I'm filming this, PSE actually just announced that they're going to be releasing their new EVL line later this week. So we'll see what that bow ends up being. Is it going to knock the Xpedite out of my top spot for favorite 2021 bow so far? I don't know, remains to be seen, but I'm excited. I've had no issues with this bow. The only reason, because I know people are going to ask, I've had no issues with the stock strings that come with this bow or any PSE that I've had for that matter. But the reason that I'm swapping out these strings is I'm actually working with a new fiber manufacturer, Bloodline Fibers. They're not a new manufacturer, but it's a new relationship for me. I've worked with them on a couple of different projects, some fun ones. They're a high-end proprietary string fiber manufacturer, so they make the actual servings and the string materials that string manufacturers then use to manufacture their bowstrings. So one of their builders, Pronghorn Bowstrings, sent me a set of brand new strings and cables to put on my Xpedite, so that's what we're going to be putting on here today. I'm really excited. Bloodline makes some really unique products. They have proprietary coatings and materials that require less upkeep and maintenance. So the whole theory behind their strings is there's no need to wax. They're very consistent, and they remain consistent in a broad range of temperatures and humidities and environments. So excited to put them on the bow, get more experience with them. If you're not familiar with the company, head over to Bloodline Fibers Instagram page and Pronghorn Bowstrings Instagram page. Give them a thumbs up and a follow. The social media guy for Bloodline is awesome. But yeah, with that all said and done, let's get into the bow build itself. So yeah, I've got my bow in the press. List of supplies that I'm going to be using today, pretty bare bones. Just if your bow needs it, I've got a set of hex keys or hex wrenches right there, Allen keys, serving jig, may or may not need that for the center serving. We'll see how my knock fit is when I get the new strings on the bow. Easton D-loop pliers, really recommend getting a good set of D-loop pliers. I like these Easton ones because they've got a whole bunch of special kind of machining to allow them to just work better with your D-loop and not put pressure on your knocking points or anything like that. Last Chance Archery bow scale. I would recommend, this is the HS2. I'd recommend getting the HS3. They made it stronger and more accurate. This particular model, I've had some issues with it reading the holding weight accurately. It seems to do the peak draw weight correctly, but the holding weight is just way off. Everything is 6 pounds on every single bow for some reason. Other than that, tape measure for just checking your specs, axle to axle and whatnot. Some razor blades for removing tie-ins, D-loops, servings, anything of that nature. And a silver Sharpie for just marking certain points, and you'll see how I use that as we go. Other than that, obviously you need a bow press. This is a Last Chance Archery Easy Green press. I haven't made any modifications to it other than the stickers. You'll also need a lighter and whatever serving and D-loop materials you might need. Draw board comes in handy. You can get away without having a draw board if you have, say, a friend or somebody that you trust to tell you when those those cams are timed and hitting at the same point. But this is just, I have a Last Chance Archery draw board that actually slides into the frame of the press itself. As I'm pressing the bow, you want to make sure that these fingers on each side are applying the same amount of pressure to each limb. That's crucial. You don't want to be pressing one limb more than the other. I'm going to go ahead and take my Peep out, take my my string from my rest cord out, and I'm just going to go about removing the string and then the cables and replacing them one by one. I do it one by one. Well, I'll take the string itself off and then I'll replace the cables one by one, just because this particular system, or like say a Matthews or definitely a Prime, there's so many strings and cables on here. You want to be sure that you're replacing one for one and you're not starting to mix them up. So I just like going one at a time, methodical. So let's time lapse that, and we're going to warp speed right now. Now, something that's extremely crucial for you to pay attention to when you're replacing or swapping out or doing any sort of tuning with your cables is the order and the placement of the cables themselves. Have a photo of your bow from the manufacturer, like just a website photo, or take a picture of your bow before you start working on it, and make sure that when you're replacing those cables that you're running them in the exact order that they came from the factory. On bows like this, it can be easy to mix up which cable rides on the inside, which one rides on the inside of the different rollers on the roller guard. It can be easy to screw that up, but if you screw that up, you can have cables rubbing together when you come to full draw. You could be putting uneven pressure on the cams and the limbs themselves that the bow wasn't designed for, and at the best case scenario is maybe it's not some sort of catastrophic issue, but you will sometimes get uneven wear or excessive wear on your cable serving. One of the things that I did to kind of help differentiate the cables, because they look very similar, the only way to really differentiate them on bows that are uniform colors is by which length of serving goes where. So one of these, when you come to full draw, one of these cables is going to ride up along the one cam, one is going to ride down along the other cam. So the servings, you need ample serving in one direction and then ample serving in the other direction on the other cables, because they're going to crisscross positions, right? One of the things that I asked Pronghorn to do for me that I think looks awesome too is they actually served a different color on my bottom servings and then my top servings. So it's just really easy for me when I'm putting this together to work out which one goes where. So yeah, let's keep going. Okay, so strings and cables are replaced. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the bow out of the press I'm going to check my axle to axle to make sure that I didn't accidentally remove or add too many twists to the cables. Also, a convenient feature that PSE has on their cams is there's a little dimple on the top and bottom cam, which is a timing mark. And on the PSE, the other bows have this, but on the they tend to be less precise. On the PSEs, I found that those dimples, those timing marks, are actually very, very precise. And when you go to check the timing of your bow, if you set it up so your cables are intersecting with the dimples on those cams, you'll find that your cam timing is pretty damn close, if not on. My dog's really upset that I'm filming this and not paying more attention to her. Do you want to help build a bow? So what I'll do now is I'll take the bow out of the press, I'll check everything. I did drop my Peep in there just as a placeholder for right now, because that Peep does actually add the equivalent of about half a turn to the bow string, so it's important to drop that in there before bothering to check with any measurements. So I'll take that out of there, I'll see how close we are, and then I'll go about tying a temporary D-loop, checking the cam timing, and go through the next steps in the process. So you might be able to see that little dimple. And that one right there. They're pretty close. So my timing marks were actually relatively close. When I add this cable for the QAD cable rest, when I put it into the down cable, that's going to throw things off a little bit. So it's close enough for me to put it in the draw board and basically tell how many twists I need to add or remove to which cable. So I'm going to go ahead and do that in a second. But before I do that, I need to tie a temporary D-loop. And I'm going to try and tie that roughly where my actual D-loop will go. Now, I set my nocking point actually based on the midpoint between the two cams. I don't go off of my burger buttonhole, which is the very common way of tuning and setting up bows, especially for bows like primes, Hoyts, some of the Bowtechs, those cam and a half, solo cam bows, things like that. The reason I don't set up symmetrical cam bows that way is because if we think about this, right, when you come to full draw, what you're creating with that string is a triangle, right? When you release, that string is then being pulled in, the bowstring's being pulled in by these cams, which if they're identical and they're attached to the same limbs, which they are, should be accepting that string back at a constant rate towards each other. So if you want the most consistent knock travel, it would make sense to put the apex, that nocking point, right in between, equilateral between these two cams. And I'm sure I screwed up a whole bunch of those technical terms right there, so mathematicians and engineers, please forgive me. But to me, in my mind, it always made sense that if the cams are symmetrical, and importantly, that you have a riser design that allows enough clearance for you to shoot right through the middle, that it makes the most sense to put that nocking point right dead center of these two cams. So that's what I like to do. You can't do that on like primes, Hoyts, other bows, because their riser designs oftentimes don't allow it, and also the different geometry of those cams, they're just not meant to do that. They're actually meant where one spools up a little faster than the other, so they're actually designed to have those higher nocking points. But on symmetrical cam bow designs like the PSE and the Prime, the PSE and the Matthews, what I do is I will just measure the midpoint of the two cams, and I'll just go off of the easiest thing to do rather than going off the axles is I will actually just go off of these high points on the string where it leaves the cams. I will find that center point, I will mark it with a silver Sharpie, and that will be the dead center of where my knock goes, and I'll tie my nocking point and my D-loop around that. That gives me the center point. Then what I'll do is I will actually adjust my rest to make so that the arrow makes a 90-degree angle with my bowstring, but I don't determine my nocking point off of the rest. I determine my rest off of my nocking point. And I've just found that setting up that way is, one, easier, and two, gets me the cleanest knock travel. And a lot of times, like with the Matthews systems in particular, if you set up your bows that way, if you're using, say, a QAD integrate rest, if you set up your nocking point dead center and your cams are timed properly, what you'll find is that integrate rest, if you just zero it out, you're probably going to be shooting bullet holes top to bottom. So the bows are really designed that way, and it makes sense when you really think about it. Again, you can't do that with every bow, like cam and a half systems, a lot of the Hoyts, the Bowtechs, the Primes, other bows, older model, like single cam Matthews and other PSE models, you can't do that. But for the symmetrical cam designs like the Evo cams or the cross-centric cams in the Matthews right now, that's the easiest and most consistent way I've found for setting up these bows. So my top cam was hitting 1/8 of an inch after my bottom cam when I put it in the drawboard. So I added a 1.5 turns to this cable right here, which connects at my bottom cam and splits off. The split yoke is at the top cam, and that should bring them pretty close to in time. If I have to do some back and forth, I'm not going to show you just to keep this video short, but let's see how that goes. Okay, so 1.5 turns later on the string that connects right there, bottom and top. Cams are perfectly timed. I set my my QAD rest, the length of this rest. If you want a video on that, there's plenty of great videos out there. T-Bone from Bone Collector's got a great one on there. Something I didn't talk about that you want to make sure to check also is your peak draw weight. I talked about this Last Chance Archery bow scale. This thing is, I just drew this back and it came back with a peak weight of 71 pounds. This is a 70-pound bow, so perfect. I was actually getting just below 70 pounds with the stock strings and everything else in specs. So these pronghorn with bloodline fiber, I'm actually getting almost an additional 2 pounds out of them with the whole bow being in specs. So already really liking these strings and cables, get a little bit extra poundage out of them. So big fan so far. Okay, so cams are timed, axle to axle is in spec, everything is in spec. It's shooting, it's pulling at 71 pounds, which is exactly where I want it to be. I've got my Peep at the right height right now. I put in a more permanent D-loop and tied in my nocking point. Now, you might notice the serving changed colors. You're not imagining that. I did redo the center serving. There was nothing wrong with the center serving that came on these strings, but the color was black and I wanted a color to match the rest of the bow. So I redid it with Bloodline 0.014 diameter serving in green. If you want a video on that or how to tie a D-loop or the nocking point, which I do always tie just a single nocking point on my bows. I just found at my draw length, 28.5 inches, most of the bows that I've shot or set up, that just seems to give me the most consistent release on the nock without any nock pinch. And a good way to test for nock pinch is to actually nock an arrow without a point in it, draw it back, and then aim up and down. And if that arrow doesn't lift off of the launcher blade of your rest, then you should be good to go. So a good nock test is you want to hear positive click on the string and be able to pull it from the string. That little bit of twang is okay, but you want that positive click, and you should be able to turn the nock and the arrow without twisting that D-loop or your Peep. If you want a great video for tying your center serving, D-loop, or nocking point, which I just tied a single nock point on there, go to Nock On TV's YouTube channel. He's got awesome video breakdowns. I have nothing more to add than what he's already produced, so I'm not going to bother adding that into this video here. Go to his channel, subscribe. If you're watching this video and you're not already subscribed to his channel, you're making a mistake already. So go there, he's Yoda, listen to him. Okay, now for tying in my Peeps, I don't do anything crazy. I'll literally just keep my Peep where it is. I'll take a Sharpie marker and I'll mark the top and bottom of it so I know if it's moved at any point in time when I'm hunting or in the field or at the range. And then I'll just take a length of serving material and I will just tie over and under knots above and below it. That's literally all that I do. I don't tie any knots above or below it, especially on high poundage bows, because there's just frankly so much tension on the string as it is that if I lose my Peep, and I've never lost a Peep, if I were to lose a Peep, I've probably, quite frankly, got bigger issues at hand, and my bow is probably totaled or close to total. So all I'm gonna do is just tie these over and under knots. I just do a double one, tie it in like so. I'll mark that. I'll then tie one more. And I'm just gonna burn those strings. Finished result. Last thing I will adjust before paper tuning is my string stop. Real easy, pretty much every bow on the market has a little set screw right there that puts tension on the string stop rod, and then there's a rubber piece. Just loosen that up, adjust this so that it's just touching your string, and then just tighten it back down. That's it. You don't want any more pressure on there, you don't want any less, you don't want a gap here, you just want it to just be touching. That's all you need and you're good to go. Now when I set up any bow, before I paper tune it, what I do is I make sure everything is lined up top to bottom. So what I do is I will actually nock an arrow, make sure my rest is in the up position. I'll just put the bow on the ground, and I am looking over the bow to make sure that arrow is running in line with my limb bolts there at the front and my cams from top to bottom. So you can see right there that that actually looks pretty good. And then from there, I will go ahead and paper tune, because what this lets me know is that if I need to make a little tweaks to my arrow rest, that's fine. But if I'm moving my arrow rest more than 1 or 2 settings on that rest, that there might actually be something else that needs to be changed on the bow, probably some sort of spacers, or on this particular bow, because the cable guard is actually adjustable, I can actually mess with that. And on the new PSE bows that were just released, there's a new tunable yoke system which you can actually play with, get about a 1/2 inch either way with that. So just some options. Every bow system is going to be different, but that's how I set up all of my bows. Okay, so first 3 shots, slight right tear. So I'm going to move the rest just a hair to the right. Sorry, slight left tear. So I'm going to move the rest just a hair to the right. So all I did was I moved the rest half a hash mark over. It was on the hash mark to the right, and now it's in between that one and the one on the left. That's it. So let's see how it fires now. Alright, so there's our first 3. There's my 4th one. Of course I didn't record it. Looks pretty good. So these are the speeds I'm getting with a 530 grain arrow, 28.5 inch draw length, and 71 pounds. So guys, that's it. That's my bow build process, start to finish. From there, I'm just gonna sight in my bow for whatever arrows I'm shooting. How you do that, there's plenty of videos already out there on YouTube for that. It's gonna depend on what kind of sight that you're running on that particular bow. It's a Spot Hog Fast Eddie XL, so I do have a video talking about that sight and how I set it up, so check that out if you want to. Guys, this is my personal process, how I set up my bows, how I rebuild my bows. There's a lot of ways to go about this. You can interchange the steps that I went through. There's as long as your bow's tuned at the end of it and you're confident in the setup, that's the most important thing, and you're being safe, of course. But check out videos and content from other guys out there. I'm sure everybody's got a slightly different twist or take on some of those things, but this is the way that I've kind of found to idiot-proof my setups, so to speak. And by idiot-proof, I mean from myself. But thank you all for watching. Keep sending, and I will catch you all next time. Peace.